Welcome to this week's episode of FTK Feature Focus. I'm Justin Tolman here at Exterro, and we have another special guest 2 weeks in a row, and both from our training department. This is Sarah Hargreaves, who is the Global VP of Training here at Exterro. Sarah, welcome to FTK Feature Focus.
Thank you for having me, Justin.
You're welcome. So, Sarah came into Access Data as well. So you are a former Access Data people. I don't know what I'm saying. And that's when we met way back in Las Vegas at
Yeah,
an
that's right.
ADUS years ago. And then, so we've been working together since. And now we're here at Exterro. What else can you tell us about yourself?
So, the most important thing to tell you is that for most of my working career, I've been involved in digital forensics and largely in relation to the investigation of indecent images of children or child sex abuse. And it's a subject that's really important to me and lots of people in the industry because we recognize that the work that we do is extremely important. We also recognize that there's a need to be fully supported and be mindful of the exposure that we as investigators experience when we do this job. And it's really important to recognize the need to utilize the technologies that are out there. But the biggest thing for me is the ability to work with Exterro as an organization and in the training department to be able to work with like-minded individuals who see that this is a really very, very serious issue. It's not an issue that's getting any smaller. It's not an issue that's going to go away anytime soon, sadly. So I think that it's about taking this rather unpleasant situation and working in a very proactive and organized way so that we can do the right things in the right way.
Exactly. And specific to today, we talked with Dan in the last episode about Project Vic, which is an organization here well, it's a system that's part of an organization here that helps combat those types of crimes. We brought you in today to talk about Project CAID, CAID. So, tell us about Project CAID.
So if you watch the last video with Dan, you'll have been aware about Project Vic. And actually, CAID is not dissimilar to Project Vic in its objectives. CAID means Child Abuse Image Database. And fundamentally, that's what this is. It's about being able to recognize the fact that we have lots of people investigating this type of material all over the country. And when I say the country, CAID refers to the UK. And this was a project that was put together based on the fact that we have lots of people investigating data in lots of parallel ways. But there needs to be a way of identifying victims if they're at one end of the country, but the computer's in the other end of the country. And also being able to learn from the data that's being gathered, whether it be that we have a vast spread of a single image, whether we can put images together in groups, whether we can put images together with victim identification information or even crime scene information. And there have been lots of challenges over the years in trying to build a database because as we grade images, which is the term that we use when we're looking at very large numbers of images and identifying those which are illegal versus those that are not, it's about being able to understand that as humans, there can be mistakes, there can be errors, there can be duplication, for example. And when hash sets are created, which are such an incredibly important part of the digital forensic process, there can be the issues where when those databases are shared with other individuals, when we're looking at data subjectively, it could be that one person looks at an image and grades it as one particular category and another individual grades it in a different way. Moreover, there could be an accidental misgrade of an image that actually wasn't illegal in the first place. And it's just human nature. So what the CAID database does is that it allows for the national grading of materials and for those materials to then be uploaded to a central database, but rather than them immediately going into the circulation of the wider database, there's almost a gateway. And that gateway is to be able to, for there to be a couple of checkpoints. The first checkpoint is that, has this image been graded to a similar level before? So if an image has been identified by Investigator A and that hash value has been recognized, it might be that that individual categorizes that as, for example, a category B, whereas another individual may categorize it as category A. In order to alleviate the confusion of two grades against one image, the images don't go through into the central database until they've been categorized by more than one individual, so that the data becomes a very reliable source of information. When the data goes into the central database, it allows law enforcement officers to then subsequently and periodically download the latest versions of the database, which allows us to then use that as a pre-categorization database. So when we process our evidence using FTK or other forensic tools, it allows us to be able to have our attention drawn to cases where indecent images that have been seen before and have been noted in the database, our attention is drawn to them. And based on certain operational objectives, that might be enough for us to be able to go to a charge. It might be that it allows us to know very, very quickly whether data is positive. It may not give us the indication that it's negative, but it does allow us to then go on a journey to look for further information, which might be first generation material or variations of material that's been seen before, because of course all of this database is relying on hash sets. So it's a very clean and it's a very safe way of categorizing this data. But I think one of the things that's really very, very important is that when you can identify data and use a very reliable and robust source of this intelligence, it goes a long way to also supporting the officers that are investigating this data and limiting the exposure that they have to experience of what is fundamentally a very, very unpleasant task that has to be done. It's a very, it comes with the rewards of criminal justice, but it's not the best thing to do. So the CAID database has got a huge number of really good benefits, and it's really important that as a software vendor, as Exterro are, that we can bring and integrate this database into our tools to support our investigator customers.
Absolutely. And that was a great breakdown. One question I have, in law enforcement agencies there in the UK, if I'm an officer who's been assigned to work CSAM cases, am I automatically enrolled? Does my agency handle that? How do I get access to the CAID information?
So the CAID information is stored nationally in one location, but law enforcement agencies basically are part of this network. Individual police forces will register and go through the process. And what's actually quite important is that for the most part, this database isn't available to anybody outside the law enforcement community, which means that it's not being used for commercial purposes or anything like that. It's about being part of that law enforcement community, and then during if you are working in a lab, then the lab that you're working in law enforcement will have their own procedures to be part of that database and the collection and the downloading of the material, because it's almost like a two-way journey. We upload and contribute, and we download and use that data as intelligence.
Perfect. So if I'm a new officer, my agency should have that covered, and if not, there's a process by which they can jump through to get access to that information and begin that communication.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing that's really important about this being a national database is that the sort of individual nature of the data comes with the individual officers during their investigations, grading the material and then that data will be collated at a lab level, and then there'll be an upload into the central database. And as I say, it will sort of stay in the holding bay until such time as it's ready to go through into the national database. So it's extremely collaborative on that national level.
Cool. Perfect. So you kind of led into it earlier. We have integration within FTK to support this process, make it easier, and I think we should take a look at that. So if you
Absolutely.
can screen share, we'll take a look.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. Yeah. So what I'm going to show you is I'm going to show you how the grading process works in FTK Central. And the reason why I'm going to show you FTK Central, of course, is because this is the review tool which enables not only the officers in the forensic lab, but also the officers on the front line to be able to be part of the investigation process. So what I'm going to show you is going to be sort of the very light workflow of how this will work. So I'm going into our FTK Central case listing, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose my case. Now, the reason why I'm going in at this level is because we want to assume that a pre-categorization has already taken place in the processing phase. And when I was talking to you earlier about the fact that the officers will download the latest version of the hash set and run that across the cases as they're being processed, what we should see is the benefit to being able to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and go into my case. And when I go into my case, I have the ability to create dashboards and pull through the high level data that I want to do. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to enter the review phase. And when I enter the review phase, what we're going to see straight away is that the case, because of the fact that a pre-categorization has taken place and that pre-categorization has yielded positive data, FTK Central is telling us that that has happened. And that's really important so that our officers that are working in the investigation are being given an early warning that there is going to be, say, CSAM or IIOC data on this case. And then they're fully warned about what's going to happen and what they should anticipate that they will see. And this is actually a really important point, Justin, because whilst it is the case that many officers anticipate that they will see indecent material because the arrests that have taken place are for that reason, it goes without saying that there are scenarios when some officers don't anticipate that there is indecent images that are going to be found because the case may not have anything to do with that nature of the material. It could be a drugs case, it could be a murder, it could be something else. So this is an early warning system that is allowing us, if the database is integrated into the KFF during the processing, this is an early warning system if any pre-categorized data is being seen. So we're generally dealing with just a general case here, but in order to sort of speed up the process, I'm going to filter for images so that, because really that's what we're interested in. We're interested in the media. So using FTK Central, I can very quickly go in and filter the files of the category graphics. And within there, just to go a little deeper, I'm just going to pick up the JPEGs. And the reason why I've done that is just to make the database, the data set just a little bit smaller. When we grade images, we always generally look at that in a thumbnail view. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the data in as a thumbnail view. Now, when we go and start the grading process, we want that grading process to happen as quickly as possible. And you can see on the screen that we have the ability to change the size of the images so that we can get more on the screen, or if the images are very small and a little blurred, we might want to increase the size of them so that we can get a good look at them. So what I'm going to do now is that I'm now going to bring in our tagging window, because what we do when we grade data is fundamentally we tag that data. So when I bring in the tagging window, what that's going to do is that any data that we apply a label or a bookmark to will be collated on the right-hand side. Now we can already see that because the pre-categorization has taken place in this case, we can see that the media categories have already been identified for us, and they're in keeping with what the CAID database requires. And now we can see that we've got our category A's, B's and C's, extreme and prohibited and indicative. And now we can go ahead and we can look at how we can grade them. Now, grading, it can be a kind of a laborious process. So what we want to be able to do is make that as easy and efficient as possible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take advantage of the feature in the tool, which is to be able to use shortcut keys. So let's just assume that all of the images that we see on the top row are going to be indecent images, and we identify them because we've looked at them and we identify them as category A images. So by holding down the control key, I can go ahead and mark all of those images, and with a simple shift and number 1, I have now categorized those images as category A images. We can see that that's happened, and we can also see that we've got a border that appears around the images that tells us that these are images A that are graded and B graded to category A. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to now grade some more images. So I'm going to go into the next row and I'm going to use the control key and grade some more images. And with the shortcut key of control 2, I'll be able to grade those as category B. And we can see that the border's changed, etc.
And those colors, those are by standard, right? Those are by the CAID standard?
So the colors really are not in relation to CAID itself.
Okay.
That is a feature of FTK Central,
Oh,
so
perfect.
that you can differentiate between them, so that when we go back into our gallery view, you can see the images that you've graded. You can see the images that are color-coded according to the grading system. But what is available for us to change is the shortcut keys that we use, so that if you perhaps have used another tool before, or you have a particular preference for using different shortcut keys, then you can change those shortcut keys according to your own individual workflow.
Perfect. And then the categories here that we have, those are dictated by CAID, and you don't have to manually put all those in. You just enable CAID for this case, and FTK Central is going to populate those categories for you, right?
Absolutely true. So when we go into the case listing, what we'll be able to see, the application administrators that work in the cases and organize and distribute the cases within the lab team, when they go into the case database or when they go into the case list, they will be able to, with a click on the case, be able to initiate the media category. And what that enables you to do is determine which categorization method that you want to use, but also which shortcut keys that you want to use, and also which color coding that you want to do. So whilst the database is at a national level, and whilst the descriptions are something that is nationally recognized, and those descriptions and categorizations go all the way through to the fact that even the judge who's trying the case will understand what those levels mean, and all of those that work in the forensic community understand what those levels mean. But because of the fact that we have lots of customers with very individualized workflows, you still have the ability to be able to tweak that so that it works in line with perhaps what you would like it to do. For example, you may want your category A's to be blue and you might want your category B's to be pink. Absolutely fine. So you've got the versatility of changing the tool and making those discrete changes, but the categorization is in keeping with the database at that national level.
Very cool. And kind of connected to something you said earlier, and I think it goes well with the highlights and some other things in the warning bar, but we've added a couple different investigator safety or health features to FTK Central. I believe if you label an image, you can set FTK Central to hide that image so that it's no longer up on your screen, so that the investigator doesn't necessarily have all these images that they've already looked at and have to continue to look at again and again.
Do you know, it's a really good point, and actually it goes a little further than that, because there are lots and lots of features in FTK, in Lab and in FTK Central. First of all, you're absolutely right that we can limit who can see this data. So let me give you an example. We have an investigator that's working on a case. The case is full of indecent material, but there is also data that he might need to bring a third party into, perhaps a financial investigator or another police officer, or even one of the legal team. It's absolutely the point that that investigator may not want to expose other people to this particular amount of data. And FTK has so many rich features in it that allows us to limit the scope of what users can see. And that can be done on the basis of permissions. So depending on the permissions and the restrictions that are based on those permissions means that a particular individual that's given access to this case will only be able to see the data that the officer has determined that they should see. But it also means that even using something like portable case, that data that they want to take out of this case because they recognize that there is a lot of unpleasant data, if they wanted to remove that data that wasn't part of this indecent material, perhaps to give to another officer for review or to give to legal counsel or something like that, there are many features that enable us to be able to restrict access to this unpleasant data, because fundamentally it is illegal data. We have to be very, very sensitive to what we do with it. We have to be very, very sensitive to who is exposed to it. And FTK's got a whole bunch of different features that allow us as investigators to work through that based upon the way that we need to handle the evidence, based on where we need to take the evidence. For example, if we need to take a particular piece of evidence to court, we can use the portable case feature to take it away without those images. So it's a very, very versatile in being able to handle these highly sensitive cases and recognize the fact that sometimes more than one person needs to get access to them. Perfect.
And so we've gone through, we code them, FTK Central can export them, and then the investigators will sync back to CAID so that the things that they learned and found are now there for future investigators, even themselves, to automatically find later, correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. And just as we said before, so if we've completed the investigation, we've now got perhaps a new set of data that because we've manually looked at that data. So now we can be part of this national community and now produce that data, export that information out of FTK Central, bring that into the upload package that's going to go up to the National CAID database, and it will go through the natural processes of finding its way into the database once it's gone through the gatekeeping process. As you rightly say, through the fullness of time, that data is going to come back so that the next pre-categorization that's been done, we're going to be able to proactively identify that data, meaning that we can find the illegal imagery very quickly, proactively, and also limiting the exposure to the officer without making them have to see lots and lots of duplicate data.
Perfect. Well, Sarah, this has been great, but I want to give you a little bit of a platform here on the way out. Again, you're the VP of training, and training's super important because none of this matters if you're not trained to know how to do it. I know you guys just or are working on implementing your brand new training office, training classroom in the London area. And what else do you guys got going on that's important, big time, that people should know about?
Oh, there's not enough time to tell you about all of the amazing things that we've got going on, but you're absolutely right. We've got a very special new training room that's opening up in London, in Covent Garden. We've been doing a lot of work to make that a really great environment for people to learn in. All of our instructors are really excited about that. We have other offices opening up in the US as well, other training environments. So it's a very, very exciting time for us. But what we've also got is we've got some new classes on the way where we're going to be taking investigators and even new investigators all the way through from the intelligence gathering, all the way through the entire forensic workflow so that they arrive based on a case that's just emerging and leaving with a report that they've conducted the full analysis on and they're ready to go to court. So we've got some really, really good things happening. But I think that fundamentally, Justin, as you know from working in training yourself, forensic training is all about competency and proficiency, and training is such an important thing because it demonstrates that you know how to use these tools. Because, you know, we are officers of the court. We need to make sure that when we conduct our investigations, we know how those tools work. We know how to validate those tools. We know how to use them in a certain environment. And we also need to know how to tailor them based upon our operational procedures as well. And all of those things we embed into our training portfolio so that when people come into our training room, we make sure that they get a really good experience, but in keeping with what the objectives are of our customers. So we listen a great deal to what our customers need and make sure that the training experience that they get is not only really awesome and interesting, but is very much in focus to what they really need to be able to achieve.
Sweet. Very cool. So we'll keep on the lookout for those classes. And Sarah, thanks again for coming on this week. And everybody else, we'll see you again next week. Thanks.
Thank you, Justin.